My name is Alex Snell. I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is a small town, small city in the mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. In terms of growing up gay, that was not easy. It was not something that I was open about. I got picked on a lot and teased, and that was very, I hesitate to use the word traumatic because I think that word can be overused, but it was very hard. And that has been a big part of my identity, is growing up that way and experiencing that and kind of the effects it's had on me my whole life. My father and mother were very religious and involved in the church, and we as children had to be too. There was a lot about that I didn't like. It felt very constraining. I felt very constrained as a kid in terms of what I was allowed to do, and a lot of things that I wasn't allowed to do related to stuff that I was really passionate about, like music, like popular music, and what I could read and not read. But at the same time, my church youth group was really the space in which I formed friendships that were kind of authentic friendships and felt safe. So it was really kind of a mixed experience. And I credit the youth group that I was in being that kind of space for me to the director of the youth program, who was herself an older woman. She was in her 50s, divorced, which was controversial even at that time where I grew up. Single woman, and she was just a dynamo, and she really, I got a lot of unconditional love from her, and the experiences that she created for us were really important. And I feel like I owe a lot to her. Her name is Betty Jo, and she is still with us, and I'm still close with her. You know, it was older women who I really felt like I related to when I was growing up, and who I now feel like, in retrospect, really were safe for me and helped get me through that period. My grandmother taught at the same school that I went to, and I used to go after school because my mother taught there too. So I would wait for my mom to get off school, and then we would drive home. And I would go into the teacher's lounge with my grandmother and the art teacher, and these were women in their late 50s or early 60s. And they would be in there smoking cigarettes and gossiping, and I just loved to hang out with them. And it felt very safe, and that art teacher was very protective and encouraging of me. So I was just reflecting on that, especially in the context of my interest now in working with older adults. College is when I came out. It was kind of one of those experiences where when I came out, people said, well, duh. And that was a little bit upsetting to me. It was really hard for me to do that. It was hard for me to come out. You know, I really kind of pursued my development of a gay identity and my sexual development on my own. Like, it was my project, and I did it on my own. The things that I was really interested in growing up was the media and magazines. I loved magazines. I loved Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair. I would read my grandmother's Family Circle magazine, Women's Day. So I think as I got into college, I found magazines that helped me kind of process my identity as a gay man. I can remember the day when the Newsweek magazine with Boy George and Annie Lennox on the cover, and it said like, the new British invasion, gender bending, and I was like, wow. I think I was like very excited, but also when I would see things like that in the media, I would also feel vulnerable because I felt like maybe that would cause someone to ask me questions, and I did not want to talk about that stuff. I think the experience of being in the Northeast was jarring for me, and so I wanted to be back in the South, but I knew I wanted to be in a big city where there would be a gay population, so I moved to Atlanta. And I became very good friends with a lesbian who was 20 years older than I was. And she had been, you know, in the scene in Atlanta for decades and would take me to all of these dive bars and places that were deeply uncool to hang out, and that was fantastic. It was also while I was living in Atlanta that my obsession with Madonna kind of expanded into dance music in general, because I was going out to bars and clubs, drinking a lot, and dancing to the music. And I love the music of that era to this day. This is like 98, 99. Anyway, I became super into Madonna, and that became really part of my identity at that point. I do attribute kind of a turning point in my kind of sexual awakening or sexual identity to Madonna, because I'm going to try not to get emotional about this, but I can remember in 1990, I would have been 17 years old, watching the premiere of the Vogue video. I remember kind of thinking, oh, like these guys, these dancers are all queens. Like they're not just gay, but they're queens, and they're owning it, and they're up in New York somewhere, and like this is a life that someone can lead. And that was a very powerful experience for me, especially in retrospect. So living in New York was amazing. I got a job at a web design company. I guess by this point, this would have been in the late 2000s, my collection of queer zines was becoming a focus. Kind of handmade, artist-made. Some of them are more underground, so they're like just literally photocopied, usually limited to 100 or 50 or 10 copies. So that kind of is a continuation of my lifelong interest in magazines. This is a zine by a guy named Olive Bouget, and he found 3 rolls of film from his first camera, which was a Kodak Graffiti. And so these are the pictures that he took when he was 8 years old. Fascinating. Some of these shots are amazing. I just think that's an amazing concept of looking back at the photos that you took as a kid, having, you know, grown up to become an artist. This I love just also because of the concept. It's called Chris, and it's got 4 issues, and each issue is focused on a different movie star named Chris, a current movie star. A lot of these play superheroes. I'm so out of it, I don't actually know who most of these guys are. So I continued working in digital media, made really good money, but I really disliked it. And I reached a point where I'm like, I gotta get out of here. I had befriended a couple, 2 men in their early 80s, one of whom was a very well-known fashion illustrator for Women's Wear Daily magazine. I would spend a lot of time with them. There was a period where he would draw me. And, you know, being an older man, obviously, there was a point when his health started failing. He had some heart problems. And there was really no one in the city available to take care of them when they needed more care. So I played a role with some of his other friends in taking care of them. I would go with him to doctor's appointments. I had to go help calm him down once in the hospital. And so I had this realization, like, oh, we as gay men don't have families necessarily that we're close to who are in New York available to take care of us when we need to be taken care of. So that's something I want to kind of, I mean, that's obviously kind of what I want to dedicate my life to, and especially older gay men with HIV. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of ageism in our culture. There's an extraordinary amount of ageism among gay men, and I feel that it is not doing this generation that really pioneered the freedoms that we have today, and went through extraordinary difficulties, both in terms of the stigma and discrimination they experienced if they lived through the 50s and the 60s, the need to hide and the risk of being discovered, exposed, arrested. Living under that is obviously going to cause pressures and problems. And then, of course, AIDS, which was an incredibly traumatic experience for gay men, losing so many people so young. We owe them as a community to make sure that they're taken care of as they get older. And that might mean taking care of them. And we need to find ways that we can do that. And so I'd like to help with that.